All right, guys, we're doing 10-6. We're splitting it up into two sections. So today and tomorrow we are working on graphing and writing the four conic sections when they are translated. What I mean by being translated is that their center and their vertex is no longer at 0. So you can see in the table that you filled out that the standard forms are a little more complex because now we can't just assume that they always start at 0. We're going to do an example of each conic section for graphing and for writing so you can see one of each. So we're going to start with example 2. Example 2 gives us the quantity of x minus 3 squared plus the quantity of y plus 2 squared equals 16. All right, now granted, example 2 says that it's a circle, but how would I know for sure that it's a circle? Well, when they graph these guys, or when they give these graphing problems to you, they're going to give them in the forms that you have copied down in your green box, okay? Later on, we're going to have to work a little harder to get that form, but since this one isn't equal to 1, like an ellipse or a hyperbola is, okay, then you know this is a circle. So this is x minus h squared plus y minus k squared equals r squared. So we know it's a circle. So if you look at your graphing notes for circle, the first thing says plot the center. And the center, remember, is at HK. So in our case, remember, H and K will be opposite of what they look like because they have that minus sign with them. So that means H is 3 and K is negative 2. Let's plot that. I'm going to use a star because technically that center is not on the graph. Okay, it just helps me form my graph. Draw some more lines in here. Next step says, using the radius, plot 4 points from the center. That means I need a point to the right, I need a point up, I need a point to the left, and I need a point down. And it says using the radius. Well, we know that r squared is 16. So what would plain old r be? Well, what's the square root of 16? It's 4. 4 squared is 16. So that means from the center, I'm going to count 4 out to the right, 4 up, 4 left, and 4 down. There's my 4 points from the center. Now I'm ready to draw my circle. There's my graph. So a center is pretty easy. Plot the center, then take using the radius, do 4 points to the left, to the top, to the bottom, and to the right, and then draw your circle. Okay? Skip to example 4. Example 4 gives us the quantity of y plus 1 squared minus the quantity of x plus 1 squared over 4 equals 1. Now again, in the directions it says to graph the hyperbola, so you know from the start that it is. But how would I know for sure? Well, with this one, it's equal to 1, so we're thinking, okay, this could be an ellipse or a hyperbola, especially because we have some fractions here. We know this wouldn't be a circle. But then you have to decide which one is it, the ellipse or the hyperbola. If you take a look at your ellipse standard forms from your green box, neither one of them start with a y. The horizontal axis or the vertical axis do not start with a y. But if you take a look at your hyperbola one, the vertical axis, the second box on the very last row, starts with y minus k squared over a squared minus x minus h squared over b squared. Okay, so you know it's that form, and if you notice, the first step of graphing a hyperbola is to determine the direction. Well, we know this one is going to go up, down. It's going to follow the vertical axis because it's in that last box. The next thing says plot the center. Well, the center is at HK. In our case, remember that's opposite of what it looks like again. So H is going to be negative 1 and K is going to be negative 1. So let's go ahead and plot that. Remember that center is not actually on the hyperbola, so I'm going to use a star to represent that. Then it says use A and B to plot the vertices and the co-vertices. Now remember, vertices are represented by A, co-vertices are represented by B. And you know this is supposed to go up and down, so that means A will go up and down and B will go left to right. You'll count out that far. All right, if you take a look up at your graph, A is supposed to be in this first fraction, so we have to draw a 1 underneath to remind ourselves that A squared is 1. Well, if A squared equals 1, then plain old A, the square root of 1, is 1. And it says B squared is 4, so that means B, the square root of that, would be 2. So if I go back to my graph, I'm supposed to go 1 up and 1 down. There's my main vertices. Then I'm supposed to go right 2 and left 2. There's my co-vertices. And I'm going to draw that dotted box. Now, through that box, through the diagonals, remember, is my asymptotes. These are called oblique since they're diagonal. Notice I went right through the center and right through the corners of my boxes. Okay, then the last step says draw your hyperbola. Remember, your hyperbola is supposed to go up and down. So all these 2 points did was help form your box, form your asymptotes to know how wide your hyperbola should be. The only points the hyperbola is actually going to go through is your main vertices. So it's going to follow that asymptote like a big wide parabola, and then you have one down here as well. Like that, okay? And that's your final graph. Those parabola-looking things, 2 of those together, that's a hyperbola. All right, so that's example 4. Plot your center, find your A and your B so you know your co-vertices and your vertices. You draw your box and your asymptotes, then you're ready to draw your hyperbola, whether it's up or down or left and right. And that was the first thing we decided. We knew it should be up and down. Okay? Now, to be able to get an example of the other ones, we need to go to numbers 23 and 26. So take a look at number 23. 23 says, I don't want to do 23. I lied. I want to do 21. Better fix that on my lesson plan in just a second. Okay, so we're doing 23 or 21. 21 is the quantity of x minus 6 squared. Oh, crumbs. I don't want to do 21 either. We'll get this figured out. How about 28? We'll do 28. I was trying to find a better one. Here's one. Okay, we're just going to call this example star. So they give us the quantity of x minus 3 squared equals negative 8y plus 2. Okay, now you obviously don't know where I got this problem. All right, so you don't know what you're graphing by reading it, but if you look at that equation, notice you only have one quantity squared. And if you think about that green box, what is the only conic section that only has one square in it? It's a parabola. So we're looking at the parabola rules. And the parabola rules first say determine the direction of the graph. To determine the direction, you're going to notice which one is squared, the x or the y. Our quantity that's being squared is the x. So if you look over at your box, if you have x being squared, or it looks like x minus h, that's the vertical axis. So this should be going either up or down. And notice that standard form is x minus h squared equals 4p y minus k. All right, so you've got your x terms squared. So we notice it should be up or down. It should follow the vertical axis. Now the next step says plot the vertex, and the vertex is at hk. So in our case, h is opposite of what it looks like, so we've got 3. K is opposite of what it looks like, -2. Let's go ahead and plot that. All right, notice I'm actually using a point here because the vertex is on the line of a parabola. Then it says find P and plot the focus. Well, we know what's in this 4P spot. -8 is. So let's set that equal to each other. We know that 4P, that whole coefficient, is the same as -8. So to get P by itself, I would have to divide by 4. Obviously, P is -2. P is -2. So it says we're supposed to find P and plot the focus. Now remember, this opened either up or down. How would we know if it opened up or down? This P is negative. That tells me it should open down. So from this, I'm going to go down 2 spots. Checking my work here to make sure. Yep. Okay. And then I can sketch my parabola. I don't have to worry about any other points. I know we've done mirrored points before. I just want to know that you know which direction and what form your graph is in. Okay. So there's my parabola, or sorry, there's my vertex and there's my focus. So let me go over that again. The first thing we did is we determined it was a parabola because we only had one quantity squared, where all of our other conic sections have 2 quantities squared. Then when we looked at our 2 options for parabola, when it started out x minus, that opened up or down, so it looked like this general form. Then we had to find our vertex of hk, so h is opposite of what it looks like, k is opposite of what it looks like, and we plotted that. Then we had to find our focus. So we took the 4P, we set it equal to that -8, whatever was in front of the parentheses, and we got P equals -2. That told us we needed to go down 2 from our vertex because we knew we either went up or down, and you're not going to go up if that P is negative. All right, so we went down 2, drew a star because remember the focus is not on the parabola, and that parabola should swallow the focus up. So there's an example of a parabola. Okay. Last one, obviously we haven't done an example of an ellipse, and I want to try, let's look at number 20. None of my examples are good examples here. I don't know why I wrote these. Let's look at number 24, I think. Yeah, let's look at number 24. (24) says the quantity of x minus 3 squared over 25 plus the quantity of y plus 6 squared over 49 equals 1. We know this is an ellipse because it's being added. You have 2 quantity squareds, it's being added, and it's equal to 1. Okay? All right, so you know this is an ellipse. And if you take a look at your notes, it says determine the direction of the graph. How would I know which is which? Well, remember, for an ellipse, your A is the bigger denominator. So obviously my 49 is the bigger denominator, so I'm going to follow this form where A was second. Okay, it looks like that. So that tells me that this is going to follow the vertical axis, meaning it's going to be up and down, or I think of that oval being up and down like a hot dog. That's what my graph is going to look like in the end. Next step says plot the center. Remember, my center is at HK, and H and K are opposite of what they look like. So H is positive 3, and K is negative 6. Now again, this is not technically a point on my oval, on my ellipse, so I'm going to use a star. Then it says use A and B to plot the vertices and the co-vertices. Vertices are done first and they follow your main axis. So remember we said this should open up and down. All right, so I should be going up and down for my vertices and out to the side for my co-vertices. So A squared is 49. If A squared is 49, the square root of that, A would be 7. And if B squared is 25, square root of that, B is 5. So that means my main vertices are from my center going to go up 7 and down 7. And then my co-vertices from the center are going to go right 5 and left 5. So there's one. To draw some more lines in my graph. Okay, so there's my main vertices. Now I'm going to do my co-vertices. And those were 5. There's my co-vertices. All right, can draw my ellipse. Mine's kind of looking like a circle. It should look like an oval. That's kind of hard because your main vertices and your co-vertices are pretty similar as far as it's looking like your radius is the same, even though it's not. Then it says on 4, use A and B to find C and plot the foci. Okay, remember way back when you did your foci in the other section, so you might have to go back and look at section 10.4. Your foci formula was C squared equals A squared minus B squared. So in our case, A squared is 49 and B squared is 25. 49 minus 25 is 24. So the square root of that is about 4.90. Okay, so that means, and remember, your foci follows your vertices. They go in the same direction as your main axis. Okay, so that means I'm going to go up 1, 2, 3, 4, almost to 5. There's a foci. And then I'm going to go down 1, 2, 3, 4, almost to 5. There's my other foci. Okay. There's my ellipse. So there's an example of, and I guess now that I think about it, I didn't do my foci for my hyperbola, and I should have. So make sure on that hyperbola example, which they didn't either really, but I would like to see the foci on example 4. So remember, instead of C squared equals A squared minus B squared, you would have used A squared plus B squared on your hyperbola one. I should have done foci there, guys. I should have done foci on the parabola as well. Well, I guess I did. I did do that. Okay, but I should have done it on the hyperbola and I didn't. So make sure you're doing foci on the hyperbola, the parabola, and the ellipse. You might want to write that into your notes since I don't have it. And I'll try to get it fixed on my main copy so that hopefully maybe you guys will have it and you won't even know what I'm talking about. Okay? All right, so make sure, again, with the ellipse, determine the form. We knew this opened up or down because that A squared is the bigger denominator. Then do your center, HK. Then determine your A and B. A will follow your main axis. We said this should go up or down, so it had to go up and down from the center. B will go right to left, and then we used foci formula to find our focus. Okay, so that's 4 examples of graphing. Now we're going to switch gears and do 4 examples of writing. Let me fix my lesson plans here. All right, so we are going to start with example 1. Let me get my notes in the right spot. So now we are writing, so we're totally switching gears here. Example 1 gives us the information that the vertex is at -2, 1, and the focus is at -3, 1. Obviously, we know that this is a parabola because it tells us it's a parabola, okay? So they will give you that helper. So if we take a look at our notes, it says sketch and choose the form. Sketch and choose the form. Okay, so I'm just going to do a really quick sketch right here. Here's -2, 1. There's the vertex. And then -3, 1. There's the focus. Remember, my graph should swallow up that focus, so we know that that parabola is pointing to the left. So now if you take a look over at your table, which option would it be? It's going to be the first box for parabola because that follows the horizontal axis, meaning it opens either right or left. Ours opens left. So we're going to be following the form y minus k squared equals 4p, x minus h. Okay. Next step says find hk. Remember, hk is my center. So I'm going to sub that right in. Now remember, when you're putting something in, you don't change h and k. It's only when you're taking h and k out that they are opposite of what they look like. So I'm going to put in y minus k is 1 and x minus h is -2, so that would make that plus 2. All right, next step says find P using the distance between the vertex and the focus. Meaning, if you look at your sketch, here's the vertex and here's the focus. How far was it from the vertex to the focus? It was 1 spot. That means P is 1. And we move to the left, so it's got to be -1. I almost forgot that. So now I can clean that up. Y minus 1 quantity squared equals -4 x plus 2. And there's my final answer. So I sketched it. I determined the form. I subbed in my vertex, my HK. I determined what P was. Remember, P is the distance between the vertex and the center, so it went 1 to the left. So that's how we knew it was -1. If it would have gone 1 to the right, it would have been positive. And then we cleaned that up. There's my equation. That's all you have to do. We just had to write it. So there's an example of a parabola. Let's skip to example 3. Example 3 is write an equation of the ellipse. So it tells us we're doing an ellipse. It gives us foci of 3, 5, and 3, -1. And gives us main vertices of 3, 6, and 3, -2. So if you take a look over at your notes, it says sketch the ellipse and determine the form. All right, so I'm just going to sketch it here. Remember foci, so I'm going to use stars. And then 3, 6, and 3, -2. Whoa, what the heck am I doing? There we go. Okay, now I'm supposed to be determining my form. Well, remember, my graph should swallow up those foci, sorry. So it should be doing this to those foci, all right? Granted, I don't know how wide this is. I get that. But the fact that my focus is in line with my main vertices in a vertical line, that tells me that that is a vertical ellipse, that it opens up and down. So if you take a look at your graph or your table for vertical axis, it will look like x minus h squared over b squared plus y minus k squared over a squared equals 1. All right, so we've determined our form. Now it says find the center using the midpoint formula. Okay, now you can do whichever one you want. You know that the center is between, halfway between the focus. It's also halfway between the center. So that's totally, halfway between the main vertices. So you can use whichever points you want. I'm just going to use the focus points because they're first, okay? But you could use the vertex as well because remember the center should be smack dab in the middle of either the foci or the vertices. So I'm going to use midpoint formula here. Remember x2 plus x1 over 2. So we've got 3 plus 3 over 2, comma, 5 plus negative 1, so minus 1 over 2. That'll be 6 over 2 or 3, and 5 minus 1 is 4 over 2 or 2. So they're saying the center is here at 3, 2. And I would double check. Let's just make sure that it's halfway in between. 1, 2, 3 from the focus. 1, 2, 3 from the focus. So I know I'm right. Okay, and that's my HK, remember. So let's sub that in. We have x minus 3, quantity squared over b squared, plus y minus k is 2, squared over a squared equals 1. Okay, so I've got that step done. Now it says find A, which is the distance between the vertex and the center. Well, you've already found the center, so let's just count. How far would it be from 3, 2 to the very top, 3, 6? 1, 2, 3, 4 spots. Let's double check. Let's go down to the other vertex. 1, 2, 3, 4 spots. So that tells me A is 4. Then it says, and C is the distance between the focus and the center, and B. I'm supposed to find all of those. Well, I know C because I have my focus. So the distance between the focus and the center is 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. So I know what C is. And then how could I find B? Well, if I use foci formula, remember for an ellipse, let me double check. For an ellipse, that's c squared equals a squared minus b squared. So if you sub what you know here in, c squared is 9, 3 squared. A squared is 16, 4 squared. We don't know b squared, but I can get that by itself. That would be negative 7. So b squared would be positive 7. Sorry, I'm running out of room. And b would be the square root of 7. So we've got A, B, and C now. The only thing I have left to fill in is A and B. So some people would say, well, why did you even find C? You had to have C to be able to find your covertices because they weren't in your picture. You couldn't just estimate them. Now, if it would have started the problem out by giving you your covertices, yeah, you would have been golden. You could have just counted them out, subbed it in. Okay, so it's kind of going to depend on the information they give you. So my final answer then will be x minus 3 quantity squared. We know b is square root of 7. So b squared, remember, was positive 7 plus the quantity of y minus 2 squared over a is 4. So a squared is 16 equal to 1. There's my final answer. Okay, so let's go back over that again. The first thing I did was sketch and determined which direction my ellipse went. Since my focus and my vertices were in line, up and down, that told me that I needed the up and down, the vertical form. Then it wanted my center. Well, the center is halfway between both the focus and the vertices. So I did midpoint formula using my foci. That gave me 3, 2. Then once I found my center, I could find A, the distance between the center and the vertex. And I could find C, the distance between the center and my focus, by just counting 1, 2, 3, and 1, 2, 3, 4. Then I used foci formula to solve for B, and I subbed that information into my general form. So that's an example of an ellipse on example 3. Okay, now let's go to number 13 and 20. Hopefully these match up a little bit better than my other ones did. Yeah, 13 gives me a circle. We haven't used one of those yet. It says write a circle if the center is at 9, 3, and if the radius is at 4. Now, for your circle, it just says determine h, k, and r, because remember, you only have one choice for your standard form of a circle. It looks like this: x minus h quantity squared plus y minus k quantity squared equals r squared. So here's my h, here's my k, here's my r, and then it says sub those into the form. So I have x minus 9 quantity squared plus y minus 3 quantity squared equals 4 squared, which is 16. That's all you have to do. So circle is super easy. Your center is your HK, your R is your radius. You sub those in. Don't forget to square the R. There's your final answer. That was an example of a circle, in case you didn't get that down. That's an example of a circle. Last one. Number 20. Number 20 gives us an example of a hyperbola. And it gives us the information the vertices are at -4, 2, and 1, 2. And the foci are at -7, 2, and 4, 2. The first thing says, sketch the hyperbola and determine the form. Okay, so my main vertices, because they didn't say covertices, are at -4, 2, and 1, 2. And my foci are at -7. Oof, I'm not going to have enough room. Let me sketch this again. Remember, that's just your foci, so I use a star. My vertices should swallow up my foci, so it should look something like this, or at least that helps us know the direction. Notice these are opening left and right, so that means my form, if you look at a hyperbola, has to be horizontal axis, meaning it has to look like this. X is the first one, and then your Y. Okay, so because it opened left to right, that means it's the horizontal axis form. Then step 2 says find the center using the midpoint. Again, center should be halfway between your focus. It should be halfway between your vertices. So you can use either set of points to find those. Since they gave me the vertices first, I'm going to use that first. So -4 plus 1 over 2 and 2 plus 2 over 2, which would give me -3 over 2 and 4 over 2, which is 2. -3 over 2, remember, is -1.5. So if I look over here at my graph, I've got -1.5 and up 2. There's my center. Next step says, It says find A. Remember, that's the distance between the vertex and the center. Find C, the distance between the focus and the center, and B using foci formula. Okay, so I definitely need A and B, and since they didn't give me co-vertices, I'm going to have to use foci formula to find B. So remember, if you look up at your graph, A is the distance between your vertex and your center. Now remember, this is at 1.5. So here's your vertex here at 4, and you have a half a spot, then 1, 2. So your A is 2.5 here. Your A is 2.5. I can't find B by looking at the graph, so I'm going to find C. C is over here at the focus, remember, and you could measure this one too. In fact, we better just check. Here's a half spot, 1, 2.5. Okay, so my A is good. Now let's check our C. We've got a half a spot, then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.5. I think it's 5.5, but I better check again. Here's my half a spot, then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah, C is 5. Okay, then I'm going to use foci formula. So remember, for a hyperbola, it's C squared equals A squared plus B squared. So I have 5.5 squared. Yes, I'm going to have to work a little harder on this. I'm going to have to get my calculator out. And 2.5 squared gives me B squared. Okay. So I've got 30.25 and 2.5 squared. Trying to find B, remember. Actually, I need B squared, but that's okay. Subtracting that 6.25 to the other side gives me 24. That gives me B is, whoops, pushed the wrong button. About 4.90 again. Should have remembered that from the last one. Okay, so I'm going to go up here then. It says for your hyperbola, the last thing you need to do is just sub into the form. So we know our center. Here's my H and my K. All right, and then I have my A is 2.5. I'm going to square that. And I have my B. I'm going to square that too, which actually we already know that that's 24. So I've got X minus a -3/2, so that's going to be positive, squared. And you could probably use a decimal there. I wouldn't have been picky on that. A squared. A is up here at 2.5. So if I square him, oh, right, that's 6.25 minus y minus k is 2 squared over b squared, remember, is 24 equals 1. And there's my final answer. And I even checked with the book, and I'm right there too. Okay, so let's go back over that for a hyperbola. We sketched our points, okay, determined that it opened right or left, so that gave us our form. Then it said to find the center, so you've got to find midpoint between either your vertices or your foci. It doesn't matter. So that gave me my HK. Once I plot that HK, I can find A by counting the distance between the center and the vertex. I can find C by finding the distance between the center and the foci. And then I can use foci formula to find B. Once I have those pieces, I can sub them back into my general form. So that's an example of a hyperbola. That gives you 4 examples to graph, 4 examples to write for 10.6a.